Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the School and Community Habitat Grant Overview webinar. I'm Summer Roberts. I'm the Washtenaw County Conservation District Community Forester, and I'm also the current administrator of the School and Community Habitat Grant, and I'm going to be your host for the webinar today. All right, so now we're going to jump into the School and Community Habitat Grant. Well, this year marks the fourth grant cycle for the School Community Habitat Grant. So there have actually been two other grant administrators before me, and I'm just finishing my first full year. So I mentioned this just because I think a lot of people might see this grant and think maybe it's the sole program or service that one particular person at the Conservation District is focused on. And as much as we love this program, we've got a lot of other things on our plates that we're juggling. So we just ask that you be patient with us. We are trying to be efficient with how we administer the grant, and we try to get back in a timely manner. But sometimes it takes us a few weeks or so to answer questions. And that also being said, we are always open to suggestions and improvements. We welcome you to reach out with your feedback on how the grant process can be improved. As I mentioned, this grant is still in its infancy, so we're still kind of developing it and tweaking it as needed. And we want that community feedback to tell us kind of which direction to go. The other thing I wanted to note is that we really strive to make this grant as accessible to many different folks in the community as possible. So there's a fair amount of nuance and some exceptions to kind of general rules that I'm going to lay out here in the webinar today. And I'm going to try to be clear on what is flexible versus where we can't be flexible, things that we have to kind of stick to for either legal reasons or to keep our own sanity and make sure that we're following our end of the bargain. So the purpose of the School Community Habitat Grant is really to assist schools and community organizations with accessing plants, especially native plants, and establishing wildlife habitat. And I've gotten a few questions about why native, what's so great about native. So I just wanted to address that plants that have evolved alongside animals in this area are typically better able to support and nourish those animals. So for example, some of you might be familiar with the research of Doug Talamay, an entomologist, and he has shown that native oak trees can support over 500 species of caterpillars, whereas a ginkgo, which is a pretty commonly planted landscape tree from Asia, hosts only about 5 species of caterpillar. So it makes a difference when you're a chickadee and you need like 6,000 caterpillars to feed one brood. So that really comes into play in the ecosystem. So that's why we typically try to focus on natives. Let's see, the next is basically answering what are the grant award options. So the grant award is basically 3 options. You can either select plant material only, you can select technical assistance only. So I've got a picture there of a design that was done by PlantWise, one of the contractors that we've worked with before on a previous awardees project. Or you can select both. If you need both plant material and technical assistance, that is certainly fine. And technical assistance usually includes things like installation assistance, maybe site prep, maybe expert design plans, and consultation on site. So we typically award between 4 to 7 projects each year or each grant cycle. And those awards have ranged from a few $100s to almost $3,000. There's no set cap. Just to give you some perspective, the grant is currently funded by a mix of millage dollars and donations. So we don't always know how much money we're going to have coming into a certain grant cycle. But in typical years, it's ranged somewhere between like $4,000 and $8,000. So you can see, we have given a significant portion of that money to one project if it's really a very compelling project. But we're also, we're always trying to balance like, hey, we want to try to spread this money around and make sure that we're supporting as many groups in the community as we can. And we have found that awardees are often able to stretch their funds if they have a supportive volunteer base that they can pull from. So that can really make things go a lot further. So now we're going to jump into eligibility. We do ask that you represent or are affiliated with a school, nonprofit organization, or community group. And we define community group very broadly. That can be a place of worship. It can be a garden club. It can be a scout troop. It can be an HOA. And it can be a township hall or a local government. So those are all things that are all places or organizations that are eligible to apply. We also ask that a site location be public or semi-public. This is one of the places where there's a little bit of gray area. The place where there's not gray area is it has to be in Washtenaw County. As I mentioned, part of this grant is millage funded. So this is money coming from Washtenaw County residents. We want to make sure that we're putting it back out into the community and supporting projects here in Washtenaw County. So when I say the site has to be public or semi-public, and I say that there's some gray area there, I have an example here in this illustration of an HOA. And we do get applications from HOAs. We've done projects with HOAs. If an HOA proposes a site that is very accessible to the public, so I've got people walking by on the sidewalk with their dog, they're looking at a installation through the School Community Habitat Grant, that's awesome. We want to see projects that are in high visibility areas because the idea behind the grant is that we want this to spread. We want communities and people to get excited about native plants, to get excited about wildlife habitat, to get excited about rain gardens, and to want to install those in more places throughout the community. So in contrast, I also have a garden that is way, way back far in the HOA community behind a gate. That's not going to be as appealing. There's, I guess, this is where the gray area comes in. So there is an argument to be made, especially if that gate is not there. And if there's enough, people in the HOA community and it's in a common place, a common area for that HOA, then there's an argument to be made there that's semi-public and that the people in that community can access it. So again, that's where the gray area comes in. I would say we are not paying for rain gardens in people's backyards. So it can't just be on your own private property. There has to be some kind of public access element to it. And we also encourage you to try to provide either some educational signage or educational events that go along with it. That's not necessarily required, but the more that you can bring an educational component to your project, the more the higher it will rank and the more I guess well received it will be. So ownership or permission in perpetuity at the proposed location is also something that we require. We have had applications where people have said, we really want to put this in for the next couple of years, but then we don't know what's going to happen to it. Again, that's not how we want to spend community dollars. We want to make sure that we are supporting projects that are going to be around for a while and demonstrating a benefit and providing a benefit to the community. So also in eligibility, we ask that you try to demonstrate a benefit to local communities, both natural and human, if you can. And you don't need to be an expert in ecology, and just, demonstrating a willingness to learn or to think through how some of these things might play out is what we want to see. We want to see that you're committed to the project and that you're interested in the outcome of the project. You're not just like, I want to throw this in and then walk away. Because I think a lot of us know that gardens and installations, even native installations, take some time to mature, and they need a little bit of TLC as they develop. So for example, with respect to benefits, again, these are very crude little illustrations, but just trying to demonstrate a point. You might, for example, if you're a school, you might have a playground where maybe you don't have a lot of trees. And we've got some kids up there on the playground in the before scenario who are sweating. They look unhappy. They are not enjoying their playground equipment. After a tree is planted, and obviously this is a very mature tree, so this has been a while after they have done this project. But after that tree is planted and matures, the kids are celebrating, they're happy on their playground equipment, they can finally use it and enjoy it. And in this case, it's an oak tree, so it's supporting a lot of other native creatures as well. So that's kind of what we're asking, that you try to think through, what's the human benefit and what are the wildlife benefits for an installation that we're proposing. And I did also have a question that came in. Someone wanted to know if you needed to remove all of the non-native plants from an area to receive a grant. So for example, I'm thinking that maybe they have, a nice mature shade tree that is not necessarily native. No, you do not have to remove it. If you have a lot of invasive plants, we would highly recommend that those be removed. Especially invasive plants, they're likely to take over the area. They're going to basically set you back in what you're trying to do. So something like Japanese knotweed, if that were in your project area, we'd want to try to get that taken care of before you do any installation. And I will say that invasive species treatment is not usually something that is covered by the grant funds, just because it's usually so expensive that it's typically cost prohibitive, unfortunately. But if you've got an area of turf, like that's usually pretty easy to dig out. Sometimes you can even just like flip the turf over and let it die. There's things that are easier to take out than like a really aggressive invasive like Japanese knotweed. All right, so now we're gonna walk through an overview of the grant timeline. So this is just a very general overview to get you acclimated to how the grant typically flows. And then at the end of this, I will go through kind of the key deadlines or key upcoming timeline for the 2024 grant period that we're in. So typically in January, the application opens, and then in June, the application typically closes. So it's between January and June that we're asking folks to submit applications. In July, we are working with our selection committee to select and eventually notify those awardees, and I'm going to go into that further. And then in August, we notify the awardees of their selection, and September, December, we match them with contractors who are going to work on their projects. And then I want to make this real clear. So I did try to put it in a different color, but I'm going to also try to make it big, that the projects are actually installed the following year. So you all would be applying to the 2024 grant but your projects wouldn't actually be installed until 2025. So I just want to make that clear about the timeline, because that is something that has tripped people up in the past. All right, so now I apologize. This is kind of where my creativity broke down a little bit, and I took a lot of screenshots just directly from the application as we currently have it. I figured, you'd want to see exactly what it looks like anyway, but you can download this application at washtenaw.org/SCHG. And we have it right now in a Word document format, which again, we did that because we thought, okay, hopefully most people can access a Word document. We know some people have had issues with like fillable PDFs in the past. But we also, try to make it very accessible. So if you can't get this off the website, you can email me, you can call me, let me know where I need to send you a paper copy. We try to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. If you are downloading it and using the Word document, this is not required, but it's very helpful if you change your text color, or at least the type of font, or somehow try to distinguish your answers from the questions, or the kind of, I guess, date of submission, name of organization. It just makes it easier to see, like, okay, yes, they've filled out every single thing and I can see all their responses. So that is appreciated if you can try to make that stand out from the original document. So on here, this is the beginning of the application. You've got your date of submission, the name of your organization type, your employer identification number. This is for the IRS for purposes of tax administration. It's very, very important here. This is where you put your email and your phone and the primary applicant contact name. And I want to stress that this is how I contact you. This is how I let you know that you've been selected. And I'll also let people know who have not been selected. But I have run into multiple times where I've tried to get a hold of teachers during the summer months. And of course, they've given me their school phone number or their school email, which maybe they're not checking regularly. So please give me something that I can reach you on reliably throughout the year. I really appreciate that. So this is the next part of the application, and it's really just making sure that you're agreeing to and understand some of the requirements and responsibilities. So the most important part of this is that we ask that you please notify us if the main contact person ever changes. And this is for forever, if you can. We want to keep tabs on these different projects, and we can't really do that if we lose contact with the main person who was working on it. So it's as simple as an email if you decide to leave your current position, or if you decide to move and you're no longer affiliated with a certain organization. Just email us and let us know a new main contact for that project. That would be fantastic. Oh, and some of you might be asking or wondering what the grant overview is, the grant awardee responsibilities that are outlined in the grant overview. That is a PDF document that we've got online with the application. It goes into detail, basically what I'm here talking to you about today, but it's always helpful to have you read that over as well and just make sure that you understand everything that's outlined in that document. And I guess the last thing on there is just recognizing that we need the application to be complete, to be fully considered. So we appreciate that. So the next part of the application is looking at the mission or purpose of your particular project. So we want to know kind of what's your organization's mission, purpose, why are you applying for the grant, provide an overview of your project and how and who you think it'll benefit, and indicate if your organization has previously received this grant or other grants or funding. So previous funding from the School Community Habitat Grant does not make you ineligible. You are definitely still encouraged to apply. However, you may rank lower. It honestly depends on who else applies in any given year. We do try to spread funding around the county and try to spread it out to different organizations. But for example, there could be a year where we only get 2 or 3 applications. And if yours is one of them and you have a strong case for why you could use more funding from the School Community Habitat Grant, then we are certainly open to considering that application. I also want to let you know that outside funding does not make you ineligible. So in other words, you are eligible if you have outside funding. And honestly, it can give you kind of a leg up because it shows that you've already done a lot of the kind of work behind the scenes to bring multiple partners into it, that you're really dedicated to the project, that you want to see it completed and have worked hard to bring different elements that will make it work. So honestly, we like to see that you've got, especially if you're proposing a larger project, it's really nice to see that you've got some additional funding from other sources. So for example, you might have already secured, $1,500 from a different grant for the design or installation of a project, and you realize that you could use an additional $500 for plant material from the School Community Habitat Grant. That is something that we've definitely done, and we are definitely willing to do that in the future. All right, we're still looking at the application. It's really not that long, but I feel like when you break it down and talk about each element, it starts to feel like a long application. But again, we tried to keep it simple and broad and tried to make it accessible to people. But let us know if you've got feedback and think that there are questions that could be changed. If there's something that's confusing in the application, please let us know. We are happy to take suggestions and make changes. So this next part is the project overview. We really want to know what your vision is for the project. We ask that you provide us with a title, and this is what we plan to refer to it as on our website and how we'll kind of advertise it to people and how we'll refer to it with you. So that title is important. We like to have that so we know what to call it. And we ask that you describe the type of your project, and we give you some examples of different project types that it might fit into. This list is not exhaustive, so feel free to get creative, and it doesn't have to be on that list. That doesn't mean if you have a project that's not on there, that's not a problem. Just feel free to put the type of project in there and maybe even a sentence or two about what that project type means to you. We really appreciate in the section if you can provide as much detail as possible. So historically, we have not done site visits prior to selecting awardees. We typically rely on your applications to communicate your project ideas, to tell us the current site conditions, and to analyze what benefits you see it bringing to your community. So these applications are really essential in helping us understand your project and what you're hoping to accomplish. We also, I think we give you the option, optional to include plans. So again, if you have already been working on a project and you've already got some plans drafted, then please include those, even if they end up not being, exactly what you and the consultant decide to do. It shows that you've been thinking about the project and that you've already invested time and energy and resources into it. And again, that's something that we like to see. So the next step in the application is site selection. And again, this is as much detail as possible is appreciated, because we're not going out to sites. So we like to be able to look it up on Google Earth or on Google Maps and hopefully get some idea of what it looks like from the aerial. So this is another important thing to note. If your site address is different from what you put at the beginning of your application, which sometimes happens, maybe you provide kind of your organization's headquarters, for lack of a better word, but where you actually want to install a project is at a different piece of property that the organization owns. So in this section, just please communicate if that's the case. If you want to put the project somewhere different than what was the address listed at the beginning of the application, please put it here so that we know, okay, this is the address we should look up on Google Earth or on Google Maps to see kind of where that project would be installed. So we also ask that you, if possible, give us a size estimate of the area in square feet. And we realize that this might be something that not everyone is comfortable with. So I'm going to try to do a little demo here. And Drew and I were practicing switching. Yes, we were practicing switching between screens, and that looked pretty seamless. So I'm going to reset this. So this is actually our office here. We share an office with the Western Washtenaw County Service Center. They have a spot for us in their building. So I'm just using kind of the swale outside the office, and I'm in Google Earth, just in the web browser, and I've gone to this little ruler, and it pops up measure, and then you just start clicking to select your starting point. And I'm just going around the swale, and it does not have to be perfect. We just want an estimate of the size of your project, so we have some idea of the approximate cost of it. So then you close that, and then in this little drop down, you can select square miles or square acres or square feet, which is really what we're looking for. So I think, let me navigate back to.
I shared that Google Earth link in the chat as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Drew. Yeah, so now, great. That was pretty seamless. I was worried that was going to be a little clunky, but that's basically what we're hoping you could do. And if you can take a screenshot of that. So I think on a Mac, it's press and hold Shift Command and 3 together. And then on Windows, there's a print screen key, or you can also go to like the snipping tool, which hopefully you can find in your search bar at the bottom. So I think the other thing on here is really the statement of permission. And as I mentioned earlier, that is really critical. That's something that we need to consider your application. We want to make sure that the project is something that's going to be there for a while, and that you've got access to it, and that it's I guess something that's going to be accessible, hopefully, to other people as well. So, and that can be something, for example, just a letter from the owner saying that you have permission to access that site and use it in perpetuity. All right, so next in the application process, we ask you to tell us about your plans for coordination and who do you think is going to be responsible for maintaining the site. Because it's super fun to put in a new native planting, a new pollinator garden, a new rain garden. And then the next year comes and it's like, okay, who's actually going to go out there and weed it? Who's going to check that there are no invasive species? What about, watering over the dry summer months as plants are establishing? So we really, again, appreciate if you can provide as many details as possible and demonstrate that you've thought about these and you've made a plan on how to address these items. As I mentioned earlier, the main contact person is crucial, but we also really appreciate having a backup person. So we would like you to please talk to your backup person, inform them about this project. If you include a letter of support from them saying that they have read the application, they agree to take over the project if the main coordinator leaves, that makes your application even stronger. It's not required, but it certainly has been an issue in the past, and we appreciate seeing that you've put in the effort to make sure that things transition smoothly should you have to leave your organization or your school. And I think the last thing we have on there is we just want to know about your community. So how do you plan to get community members involved? Do you anticipate any challenges? Just again, seeing that you have thought through these potential issues ahead of time gives us more confidence that you're going to be maintaining this project and making it the best it can be. So we like to see that. So this is kind of, I guess, maybe the most fun part of the application. This is where you actually get to request your grant awards. So you can check them all. You can check one. You can check a few. It's totally up to you. So for site materials, this is typically, indicate if you need mulch or signage or landscape timbers or other things and what you might be able to provide yourselves. And you can actually do that earlier in the application. We cannot always provide those things, but if we happen to have enough funds that year, then we try to help support projects as much as we can. With respect to site installation, we have had projects where a contractor has done the site prep, has done the plant install, but I want to say that it's really nice when a project coordinator or the main contact person of a project says, hey, these are the things that we can bring to the table, and that might be mulch, it might be volunteers, it might be site prep. So it's great to see that, if you have things that you're able to contribute as well, that will stretch the funds so that we can support more projects throughout the county. And I also want to say for number 4, site installation, we've got volunteer outreach support listed on there. And I want to clarify that is us helping with volunteer recruitment and not with facilitation or coordination. So basically, if you tell us, I need help finding people that will come and work with me on a specific day at this site, we are happy to put that in our newsletter. We're happy to get the word out on Facebook, whatever we can to get more people to your event, but it is your event. We would not be there to help you facilitate it or to coordinate it. All right, I think this is the last piece of the application. So this is kind of a catch-all category, I guess. We just want to know if there's any other relevant material or information that you want to share. We'd love to know, how did you learn about the grant? If you have a budget or an estimated budget for what you think your project would cost, that's very much appreciated. That's not necessarily required, but very, very helpful if you have even like a vague idea of how much it might cost. And we really do encourage a lot of community members' letters showing that you've got commitment for the project. We also ask, if there are certain plant materials that you're looking for, that you really have to have something specific for your project, let us know as soon as possible, because that sometimes can take a while to source and to figure out if there's, even a nursery that's growing what you're after in the coming year. So we do appreciate having that as soon as possible. And if you can provide scientific names along with common, that's even better, because common names often you've got things that are kind of two different things that are maybe called the same common name, and that can make it a little bit confusing. All right, so I just want to finish that section up by saying that the application submission and deadline for this year, you can download it again at washtenaw.org/SCHG, and you can download the application there as well as that overview document that I mentioned, fill in the information, and then submit it to the email address listed on the website. And that this year is my address, summer@washtenaw.org. And the deadline for 2024 is Monday, June 10th. And I do ask, just for my sanity, that you please put 2024 School and Community Habitat Grant application in the subject line, just so that when it pops into my inbox, I know exactly what it's for and I don't miss it. So I really appreciate having, that kind of in big, bold letters that I know, okay, this is an application. I know exactly where to file it and make sure that it gets into the process. All right, so going back to our calendar, I now wanted to dive into the evaluation process, because we got some questions about, well, how do you evaluate these different applications? So, the evaluation process typically, it actually starts earlier behind the scenes than in July. Typically right about now in April, we're reaching out to members of the community to invite them to be on the selection committee. And it's typically ends up being about 5 or 6 members of the community that have native plant or natural communities backgrounds. And we ask that they please recuse themselves if they or a group that they're affiliated with are applying for a grant. And we also welcome past awardees to come and sit on that selection committee and help us decide on the next round of awardees. So it's kind of fun to have them kind of go full circle in the process. So then in early June, I'm going to be looking through applications that I've received and taking out any incomplete ones. And then in late June, that selection committee is going to receive the rubric and the applications for review. And then in mid-July, the selection committee finishes their reviews and they submit all their rubrics for compilation. And then towards the end of July, we all sit down together to discuss the applications and to select awardees. And just to give you all an idea, the application review can usually take anywhere between 4 to 6 hours. We typically, on average, have gotten about 11 applications per grant cycle. And typically we meet on Zoom for about an hour and a half to try to whittle down the applications to typically between 4 to 7 that are actually awarded, depending on how much budget we have in our grant that year. And also we do our best. We're not experts. We don't know exactly what things are going to cost. And so we try to whittle down the awardees to what we think is appropriate given our current budget. And that's where a little bit of your patience comes in. And I'll get into that kind of later on in the process. So this is the evaluation rubric. It is also included in the PDF, which is the overview PDF, which is available on the website, right? I think it's right beneath the application. So I encourage you to go and look at that. It covers pretty much what we've talked about today. I think I'm trying to see if there's anything, contract or agreement with the landowner. We like to see a clearly defined, dedicated place for the project. It's got to be in a we like to see it in a high use or high vis area, accessible by the public or community. And as I said earlier, there's some nuance to that and some gray area. We do try to give extra consideration for areas that maybe we haven't given money before from the School Community Habitat Grant, or that don't have existing natural areas or habitat projects. We do like to see leadership and coordination to maintain that site. We like to see projects that are realistic for the group to implement and maintain. And again, the long-term continued community involvement is really an important piece as well. All right, and then in August, this is typically when the WCCD reaches out to awardees and lets you know that you've been selected, and we'll also let you know if you have not been selected. And we do our best to try to give you feedback on maybe what you could do next year, because we hope that you'll reapply. Just not getting it one year doesn't mean that you had a bad idea or that we didn't want to fund it. It was simply based on what we received that year. We, based on our rubric, there were other projects that took precedent, but we really do encourage you to try to tweak it a little bit, maybe find some more commitment from the community, maybe think a little bit harder about how you can structure your volunteers to come out, and then resubmit, because this is something that we want to give away this money, and we want to support as many community projects as possible. So we do encourage you to try again. And I'm just going to hit it home one more time, especially because I've run into this a few times. Please, please, please be responsive. I know everybody's busy in August. You're out, you're on vacation, you're having fun. But if you please give me an email or a phone number that you check over the summer, I want to be sure that I can get in contact with you in a timely fashion. And I don't want to have to move along to a different project. So please make sure you're in contact and in communication with us during the summer months. All right, so now we're getting into, you've gotten the notice that you've been awarded, and now we're matching you with a contractor. So I'm about to outline the ideal flow for how this goes. And of course, it never goes ideally in real life. There's always things that come up and take more time, but this is what we aim for. So the first thing would be that in September, awardees would meet with me or whoever's administering the grant at the WCCD. And typically we have a virtual meeting in September with anyone who's key to the project success. So, if you're an HOA, maybe you have a management firm. If it's a school and a teacher applied, maybe you also want to bring in your principal. Maybe you want to bring in facilities. Maybe you want to bring in anybody else on staff that you think would play a crucial role in this. And we just confirm our understanding of the project. I might have some specific clarifying questions that I want to ask you, and we just make sure that we're all on the same page and have the same expectations for the project. So if that all goes to plan, then in October, the awardees would schedule a site visit with the contractor and or submit plans that they would like to request. And I guess one thing that I maybe forgot to mention is that you are welcome to tell us if there's a contractor that you've worked with in the past that you would like to be paired with again. Or you can tell us, you know, kind of what your ideal fit is, and we'll try to pair you with one of the contractors that we know are interested in working with us on school community habitat grant projects. And that's how we pair you, basically, is based on your preference or on what you tell us, and then we try to work it out with the contractors that we know of who are interested in doing the school community habitat grant projects. So I try to minimize being the middleman as much as possible, because it's no fun for you, it's no fun for the contractor. I want it to be as easy for you two to coordinate as possible. So I do, like, once the WCCD and you have picked a contractor, I connect you two, and I have you two talk to each other directly. I don't want to be in the middle. So you would reach out to that contractor and find a time that works with both your schedules to meet on site. And typically the conservation district is not even there. We're not involved. We just get a report from you and or the contractor afterwards, telling us, you know, hey, we met. It's usually just an email like, hey, we met, things went great. And the contractor is going to be following up with a quote or an estimate. So in November, that's typically when the contractor sends the quote to the WCCD saying, hey, I went out, I looked at the site, I, you know, reviewed what the applicant wants for their project, and this is what I think it's all going to cost. And this is where I ask for your patience, because again, when we pick the projects, we don't completely know the cost. And so we have to kind of realign the budget to match with the project. So sometimes I got to come back to an applicant and say, hey, you asked for, you know, 2 different places that you wanted to do something, and you asked for all these plants, and we're going to have to scale it back a little bit to stay within budget. And I just noticed that we are really running short on time, and I must have been talking a lot. So I'm going to try to pick it up just a little bit. I apologize. So there's a little bit of reconciling with the budget that has to happen during that time. So typically that's what happens in December. I work with the contractor to try to adjust projects to fit within the budget. And then projects are installed in, well, this is the next phase, projects installation. Typically in January, I finalize those award amounts with awardees and just make sure that you're comfortable with what we finally landed on, because it may be a little bit different than what you applied for. And again, just reinforcing the fact that your project will be installed the following year. So now it's spring or fall of 2025, for example, for this year. All right, and then so for this timeline, for the 2024 grant timeline, January was when the application opened, June 10th is when it closes, July through August is when recipients are going to be selected and notified. September through October is when we're going to work to try to match you with a contractor, and you're going to do your site visits. And then spring or fall, the recipients are going to receive plants and support with their installation. So that's spring or fall 2025. And I guess another point here is that the awardee never receives the funding. We pay the contractor or the nursery directly. So all of the invoices come to the conservation district, and we take care of all that bookkeeping on our end. Okay, I apologize. We are really out of time. The awardee responsibilities are basically, this is what's outlined in that overview PDF. And it's really, the number one thing is just to be responsive. Please give us a contact and a phone number that is going to be available, especially over the summertime. And you are the one who's responsible for any volunteer coordination. We, again, can help recruit people, but we're not going to be there to run an event for you. We also have a habitat sign that we basically print and deliver to you, and it's a really nice sturdy sign that you can put in your project. And we do ask for a couple of reports. There's a report that it's really simple, like 1-page report that we ask for with photos right after you've done your installation. And then we ask for one year later. And we will be sending out a recording so you can read this more thoroughly, but I'm gonna just, in the interest of time, just breeze through. This is an example of a project. It's Pittsfield Township Community Center, their native plant garden. There's the WCCD signage that we provided, and they also have their own educational signage on T-posts. And this was about 700 square feet on one side and about 300 on the other side. And they asked for everything, and it was a little over $1,000. So they wanted consulting, design, and plant material. This is the We the People Opportunity Farm at Ipsy. It was part of a larger project with Water Resources. It's a giant rain garden, and they only wanted plant material, but because it was so large, it was almost $1,000. And then this is another example of a project that we've done or worked with. This is the community food forest at Leslie Park. So this was Ann Arbor residents who they did all the designing and planning for their food forest. They developed a partnership with Ann Arbor City Parks and demonstrated that they had involvement and commitment from their neighborhood and the Parks Department. And they only requested some supplemental native plant materials at about $400. So I apologize. I took up more time than I anticipated, but that is the end of our webinar, and I hope it was useful and helpful. I think hopefully we answered most questions. One other question I remember that came in was asking if you could request funding for consultation of an existing wildlife or native habitat. Yes, you can. It might not be as competitive as the others. We usually have been trying to install new habitat, but it's possible. If you just are looking for like a maintenance plan, you can still apply. So with that, I say thank you again, and please visit washtenaw.cd.org to check out our upcoming events and sign up for our monthly e-newsletter. And thank you everyone for attending, and have a great rest of your day.